podcast is back. For people who are just joining us for the first time, it is a renewed kickoff of what we're going to do here at the site. All things Texas A&M football, all things Texas A&M sports as a whole. If you don't know already, I am Tony Catalina, the Texas A&M insider, alongside with Cade, Draughon, the lead recruiting analyst. We are going to come here Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday every week moving forward. That is the goal. That is the hope. As long as nothing changes, we hope to be here live with you guys 3 times a week. Monday, we're going to talk to some opposing beat writer, Kyle Field or opposing field. We're going to do podcasts right on the spot there, talking all things A&M football. And it's going to be a heavy football show, but it's not going to be all football. Obviously, there was some basketball news with Jordan Pope committing to Texas A&M today. But before we get started, Cade, how are you doing, my friend? This is kind of the first time that we had, this type of setting where me and you are going to just talk ball, man. We're just going to talk some ball.
Yeah, we've been talking and planning this podcast out for a couple months now. So it's exciting to get this going. Obviously, the season's right around the corner in about 3 weeks. So there'll be a lot to talk about, both on the recruiting front and also, the games that are getting going. So really excited to be here, and we're going to have a great season.
For sure. And obviously, shout out to Randy. The first comment wrote, "Whoop, that's funny." Rolling into my biggest fan, Rachel, my wife, giving us a yay. So sorry, Rachel, you didn't get the first comment. That goes to Randy. But, obviously, like I said, this can be a stage setter. We got a lot to talk about. The AP Top 25 rolled out today. So A&M, we saw where they were. We're going to talk about, is it too high? Is it too low? Is it just right? On top of that, the Jordan Pope news. And I think we want to start there because football is going to be the focus of the show, right? Right now is going to be a heavy football-centric conversation, but we don't want to, we cover everything Texas A&M. So with you here, Cade, Jordan Pope, adding another big piece to the backcourt. What do you like about the Jordan Pope signing, and what is just your overall sense of what they're getting from him, the former Texas Longhorn?
Yeah, so of course, over the course of the summer, we knew that they were keeping a roster spot open with all of the eligibility, drama. It seems like every day there's a new lawsuit or, some sort of eligibility news. So it ended up working in their favor, having a roster spot open for Jordan Pope. Obviously, anytime you can take a guy that averaged about 13 points per game in the SEC, it is going to be a win. You add him in, with a guy like PJ Haggerty, and just it bolsters up that guard rotation. You got a guy like Mackenzie Mbaku coming back that was injured most of the year last year, and so I think it's going to be a good addition. This is a guy that's almost played nearly 100 college games. He had some experience at Oregon State previously before going to Texas. And even when he was in the portal before going to Texas, A&M was in there, during that race. So for him to get to College Station is definitely big news. It's a big cherry on top to that year 2, roster that Bucky has built in College Station. And I think it's going to be a really intriguing, piece. And also, some 3-point shooting as well. So very, very impressed with what Bucky's been able to do and the foresight to be able to, have that spot open given the current landscape of college sports.
For sure. And I wanted to put Randy's comment up there because he said it. Pope will give you instant offense off the bench. You're absolutely right. And, when we had talked to Bucky throughout the spring and as we got into the summer here, we got to go to a few practices and kind of really see the way this team is being built. And they had always had that one spot open, and we had thought maybe it'd be Marcus Hill or maybe it'd be somebody else. But I guess the way the new 5-5 worked out, they kind of earmarked who they wanted. They found a way to get a guy that they were really encouraged by, and he fits right into their system. And you talked about some of the things that he brings, covering him. I've been to, at least 4 A&M Texas basketball games at this point, maybe 5 if you count the SEC, tournament in Nashville. But he's been a leader, right? He's somebody who the team respected, the coaches respected, even somehow found a way to exit out of Texas and still keep respect while going to A&M, right? This is a kid who's really well respected and well liked. And so if Bucky earmarks you as somebody he wants, I'm going to sit here and say like that's a good mark on him because he's a really good talent evaluator, and obviously you've seen him play. He's in the conference. He's got skins on the wall. Started off at Oregon State. Like this is a guy who can score in droves. He can make plays, and he's really going to help facilitate in this system. Now, we talked our basketball, right? And we said that this is going to be a football show, but plenty more basketball coming. We're going to be at every game this year, baseball too. So just stay locked with us for all sports, right? But right now, we're on the cusp of football season. So close that the AP Top 25 poll released today, Texas A&M sitting in at number 8, which is where they finished last year as well. Finished the year at 8 and have entered this season at 8. Rounding out the top 10 is Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, Indiana, Miami, obviously A&M, then Ole Miss and Oklahoma. A lot of SEC flair there, obviously. For me, when I look at this and I see this, I'm a bit surprised. Not because I don't think A&M is talented, not because I don't think A&M is worthy of a top 10 selection or, being in that spot. I just thought I've been trained to see that they're going to, discredit some of the stuff that A&M has done, just historically speaking, right? Like they had lost a lot of people. They had lost, 15 or so players, 15 starters. I just thought they would get dinged and find themselves probably in the 11 or 12th. Now, I don't have any single problem with them being at the 8th spot. I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's a belief system in Mike Elko. So for them to be at 8, I think some people are going to talk about them as the overrated situation, not necessarily buying it, right? I think that this is a respect thing. And again, you say it with a grain of salt because what does preseason polls really matter? What's it mean, right? So I'm encouraged what you think, Cade. What is your thoughts when you sit here and see A&M sitting 8 at the AP poll right now?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it's pretty fair based off how they finished the season last year. My overall thoughts on preseason rankings are that they don't really matter too much. Obviously, we're all guessing based on the roster management and the moves that people have made in the offseason. But a lot of times when you look at the preseason rankings and how things end up, it's usually not the same. There's usually teams that start in the top 10 that, end outside of the top 25. And then there's teams that start unranked that end up having good years. So ultimately, I don't really hold too much stock in the preseason AP poll. But, given where we're at in the season, it's something to talk about right now. And yeah, I think I've seen some people say that A&M is a little overrated, but I necessarily don't really agree with that mostly because of what Elko's been able to do in his first 2 years. The turnaround that he's done. Also, the way he's used the portal. He's used the portal very well since he came to College Station, and some of the additions that he had, across the offensive line and on the defense have definitely impressed me throughout fall camp. But like I said, I think overall, them being at number 8 right now doesn't hold a lot of weight for me. And I'm ready for them to, start playing games and start actually proving it on the field.
For sure. And I think, like you said, it's just conversation fodder, right? It's something to talk about. It's something to really dissect. And ultimately, the play on the field will determine where they're at. But when you look at where they finished at 8, like I mentioned earlier, and where they started last year, I believe it was like at 19, like this is a team that if you can start at 8 and get that early respect, it can only help you as far as the season progresses, right? Like, so, you won't fall or plummet as much. You have way more wiggle room than if you started at 19 compared to 8. So yeah, I guess you take it with a grain of salt, understand that these are writers just like us who are making these votes, but ultimately the college football, committee will make that decision as we get into November. But when you look at it, it's a good thing, right? It's a national respect thing. Your top 10. I think some people get the BAS a little bit here in College Station, and they talk about how they're a little bit nervous about the height and expectations. I say embrace it, right? Like what is pressure, right? Pressure is a privilege. I think this is a team in a program led by Mike Elko that understands that they're really just scratching the surface. And if they want to be and get to where they want to go, they're going to have to deal with this constantly, right? They're going to have to find a way to just find their best football when it matters most. And that means beating Texas at the end of the year. That means finding a way to beat Miami in the CFP. So, this is a step in the right direction. Obviously, this is something that A&M should be encouraged by. Now, speaking of encouragement, and you talk about some things that they've done really well is on the recruiting trail, and there was some huge news. Where we want to start is obviously in your expertise there, where Donald Tabron out of Detroit, 5-star quarterback, somebody who could be a cornerstone piece, obviously a huge piece of this 2028 class. Wanted to start there with you, Cade. Tell me what your initial thoughts are of just what he brings to this program and what it means to get a commitment from a kid like that.
Yeah, it's huge. You look at, 247, we at 247 have him ranked as the number 3 overall quarterback in the country, number 4 overall player in Michigan. So you're talking about a highly regarded prospect in the Midwest, in Big Ten country. And you went in there, Mike Elko circled Donald Tabron early on as a priority, went in there and got him over programs like LSU and Oregon, 2 programs who, have a reputation for recruiting and developing high-level quarterback talent. So that says a lot about what Elko's building ultimately, with his program and the clip that he's been able to recruit at. You look at the timeline of how this played out. He visited for the Mississippi State game last year. He came, it was his first time going to Kyle Field, and they gave him the offer there. So they gave him an offer in person, as one of the highly recruited players that were on that visit list that week. And it was a really good starting point for that relationship. He ended up coming back for junior day in January. And anybody who follows Texas A&M recruiting knows, those junior day, visit lists are very important. The year before, the big quarterback that came to campus was Jace Johnson, who ended up being the commit in the 27 class. This year, it was Tabron. So if you look at the junior day visit weekends that they have in January, it'll tell you a lot about who they prioritize early on in the process. And Tabron was another example of that. He ended up coming back for spring practice in April. And after that visit was when I started hearing some smoke that Tabron and his camp had some strong mutual interest with Texas A&M. I started hearing that on the 7-on-7 front. And so that momentum ultimately carried over into June when he came back to College Station to work out at Mike Elko's summer camp. Me and you, Tony, were there. We got to see him throw in action. And those camps are always star-studded. They have a bunch of stars on the field. And that day, Tabron was one of, if not the, most impressive prospect out on that field. Just seeing him throw, seeing him, use his mechanics, use his legs a little bit, was really, really fun and really intriguing. But the main thing from that camp that really stood out to me was just his comfortability being in College Station, being around the coaching staff, being around the other recruits, the other commits. It really felt like he had, some comfortability in College Station, and moving forward, we felt pretty good about where they stood. We knew he was going to make a decision before his junior year or his junior season, and that ultimately happened on Saturday. So Mike Elko got the job done. And, like I said, this is number 3 quarterback in the country. Like, this is one of the top guys in the country. When you're building your recruiting class, if you look at the top programs, they typically go after their top priority quarterback first and start building the class around them. Part of it is the mystique of having a really highly rated or really talented quarterback in your class and having other players want to join and play with them. But part of it is also the vocal aspect of being the signal caller and doing the peer-to-peer recruiting that the quarterback can do, during the recruiting process. We saw it in 2026 with Healy Mikasuga. We saw it in 27 with Jace Johnson. Just being able to go to game day visits, go to official visits, just visits in general, and ultimately start building bonds with some of these A&M targets that they're going after. So it was really important for them to get this done early, and they did. He's the 2nd overall commit in the 2028 class, joining Chance Archangel out at Westgate in Louisiana. So really, really strong start to the 28 class for Elko and the Aggies. A lot of credit should go to quarterback coach Joey Lynch, as well as offensive coordinator Holman Wiggins. Those two guys, laid out a plan to Tabron. And, whenever I spoke to him during our commitment interview before he announced, I asked him about Joey Lynch. And I asked him, because some of the conversation during fall camp has been, how much is Marcel going to benefit with having a hands-on quarterback coach? Because last year he had Colin Klein, who was the offensive coordinator, who had a bunch of other responsibilities that was on his desk. Now Joey Lynch is the guy that can sit there in every single meeting and watch film 100%, with Marcel and make sure that they're maximizing that potential to the best of their ability. And that was something that really, really stood out to Braun, and something that he brought up to me because he had noticed in other, programs and other schools that were recruiting him that sometimes the quarterback coach doesn't have that time to be able to put in to day-to-day, help the quarterback out. Sometimes it's the head coach that's the quarterback guy, or it's the offensive coordinator, and they've got a bunch of other stuff on their plate. So that was something that really stood out to Braun. And yeah, just overall, Tabron talked about the relationships that, Elko and the staff have built with him. And, we hear that time and time again. The recruiting staff knows what they're doing. They know how to create relationships from the beginning and maintain them all the way to signing day. And obviously Elko shows that, he's going to care. He's going to care for the player, but he's also going to, push them. He's going to have a standard that he wants them to meet. And the recruits, they're not shocked whenever they come on campus, whenever they like the 26 class, whenever they get on campus, they're not shocked whenever, there's a high standard that they have to uphold. And Tabron, those were all things that Tabron talked about. And so, yeah, just huge start to this 2028 class.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because there was a lot of good information there. And some of the things that stood out to me was what we saw at camp, right? We saw a big, strong kid. We saw a confident kid, a kid who was physically, really more impressive than a lot of the guys that were there. I mean, there was a lot of top talent and a lot of dudes who were getting offers from A&M. But you kept coming back to this kid. This kid looked special, right? He just looked like the football came out of his hand a little differently. His footwork was a little cleaner. It was a little more crisp. And you could tell from the way the coaches were operating around him, this was a kid that was a priority, obviously. And it's a no-brainer with the way he's recruited nationally. And to your point, I mean, before I got here, I was at the Austin Statesman and I was able to do a sit down with Marcel Reed. And I spent the whole day with him, right? And we talk about it and I wrote the story and everyone knows it, but I've spent 12 hours with Marcel Reed. And part of that was being able to spend time with Joey Lynch and kind of seeing that relationship one-on-one, like you mentioned. And it's so valuable. It's so detail oriented. Joey Lynch is he's a ball coach, but he's a teacher first, right? He's an educator first. There is a why for everything they do. So when you get Donald Tabron, like you mentioned, in a room with a guy like that, it's captivating, right? It's somebody who can really to appeal to a kid who has his priorities straight. Like, yes, we see a bright future for you, but beyond that, we can help you now and in the future develop to be the best version of yourself. And to your point, with the programs that don't have those QB coaches, you can't make promises like that. You just cannot find the time and the effort to really develop a kid the way he needs to. And in today's current climate of NIL and all these kids making money and all these promises to him that, sometimes players get on the field early, it's kind of like throwing, into the wolves a little bit, right? Like if you're not ready and you don't have to be good, A&M, they have a way to get the best out of kids. So with that, I want to stay with the Tabron situation because some of the things that I said, I want to hear more from you. And specifically, what does this mean, for the 2028 class? And what does that mean? What are we getting here as far as, you mentioned it, like a class leader, somebody who's going to go out there? What does it actually mean for this class?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is going to be, the leader of the class. every time you speak with him, whether it's for an interview or, off the record, you can just tell, he's got a good head on his shoulders. He speaks very eloquently. He seems like he's a nice kid and everything like that. So he's got all the intangibles to be able to be that class leader, to, be someone that his peers respect and want to play for. And so, obviously moving forward, there's going to be some, targets on the board that will be in town the next couple months for game days. And I can bet you that Donald will be out there recruiting, will be out there, putting his recruiting hat on and trying to build the best classes he can possibly build. And, moving forward, guys, in the greater Houston area, guys like Ian Thomas, the number one running back in the country at Tomball, guys like Dylan Mitchell at C. King down here in the Houston area. Those are guys that I guarantee you Donald is going to be in communication with and be talking with throughout the recruiting process. So just to be able to have somebody like that that's highly regarded, that's respected, it's going to go a long way to ultimately building what Texas A&M wants to build on the heels of this 27 class that's already ranked number 1. So definitely checking the boxes on that, and I'm really excited to see how Tabron helps and moves the class forward.
For sure. And as we kind of move and pivot into talking about this year's class and the fall camp and everything we've seen, one question, and it's a good question from Randy. I don't want to put you on the spot because we didn't, but we get the live reactions. We want to hear what the people want to know. And where, in your opinion, do you have any intel on where the Aggies are with the 2028 legacy recruits? Shout out to Randy for the question. Cade, do you have anything further to add to that?
Yeah, well, I kind of mentioned it a little bit about I believe the two that he's referring to is Ian Thomas, which, like I said, is the number one running back in the country down here, in Tomball, real close to College Station. His father, Rodney Thomas, is a Texas A&M football legend and is beloved across the state, beloved across the Texas A&M fan base. I will say, I spoke to him in the spring. And it seemed like that was really when his recruitment was popping off. He had the number one ranking come out, and all these big time schools were throwing their hat in the ring there. And it seemed like Ian is going to do his own process. He's not just going to go to Texas A&M just because of the family connection or because of his dad. I think he's going to look at all of his options and make the best choice for him. That said, I think Texas A&M is in a good spot. He talked to me about Trooper Taylor and the relationship that they've built, up until this point, feeling like a priority, feeling like he's really wanted by the Texas A&M staff. We will have something coming soon with him. So stay tuned for that. I don't want to tip my hand too much, but the other, legacy recruit that he could be referring to is Dylan Mitchell, C. King wide receiver, who's really, he's really just an overall weapon, in my opinion. Last year, C. King had a great year. They had a state title game appearance, and Dylan was one of the best players on that C. King team. His dad, Billy, played defensive back at Texas A&M in the 90s, and his mother also is a former student at Texas A&M. So he comes from an Aggie family, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention his elite level speed. He won the 6A UIL 100-meter state title a few months ago with a sub 10. I think it was like a 9.7 or something like that. I want to get the number correct on that, but basically his speed is elite. If he wanted to, he could only focus on track, and there could be an Olympics in his future. So that's the type of speed that we're talking about. Elite level returner of punts and kicks. They usually use him in the slot at receiver, but they can put him in the backfield at running back as well. Just get the ball in his hands, let him make a play, let him do yards after the catch. So really elite level player. Last time I spoke to him was in the spring as well. He said that Texas and Texas A&M were both standing out and setting the pace in his recruitment. We should be having an update with him as well soon. But A&M is looking in a very good spot for both of those guys. So definitely keep an eye on that moving forward.
For sure. And obviously, Cade, amazing, right? I mean, that's like 25, 26 minutes of just straight recruiting content. If anybody obviously wants more than this, you got to give Cade a follow on X, on Twitter. And also, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we're running the 60% off annual VIP promo, with the promo code being GigEm60. It's really just a no-brainer right now, especially with football coming around the bend here. Cade's going to have a ton of stuff. Jackson DePasquale is going to have a ton of stuff. Y'all know Tarp already. You know Jeff Tarpley and what he's going to put out. And obviously on the team side, I'm going to do everything I can to earn you guys' viewership and everything. So just stay locked with us. We're going to have a ton of content. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have conversations. And that's just a little bit of it, right? And this is what it's going to be 2-3 times a week. We're going to keep it coming. And as we kind of change gears, switch, talk about this Texas A&M football team, the 2026 Texas A&M Aggies, 2 weeks exactly to the day. They finished their 10th practice of 20 practices today, Monday. So the 17th of August. A lot to take away, right? There's been a lot of things to see. I've been to every single practice. Cade has been to 90% of them. You know what I mean? So we know what we've seen. We've gotten 2 full practices and 6 total viewing periods out of the 10. So as far as access goes, this is unprecedented as far as what A&M has allowed us. Mike Elko and staff, shout out to them for letting us come out and see stuff and have a more informed opinion on all of this, right? So with that being said, we got another one tomorrow on Tuesday, and then Saturday will be the last full viewing period we get. So you're going to want to be a VIP subscriber. Saturday is going to be the most detail-oriented intel that we can give you for the rest of camp. I want to say that again. Tuesday and Saturday. Saturday, August 22nd, will be the last full practice that media gets. If anybody tells you anything beyond that, it's cap. August 22nd will be the last time we get full viewership, and we're going to have everybody there. The whole squad, the entire GigEm247 Sports is going to be there. We're going to have post-game reaction videos and all that. But let's get down to the brass tacks, right? This is a team in a lot of position groups, has a lot of talent, full stop, right? We know about some of the things that people are worried about, right? What does the linebacker room look like with Damian Sanford coming back from injury? What does this O-line look like with 4 new starters? But when you look at this group and this team as a whole, wide receiver is loaded. Cornerback and secondary is loaded. I want to talk and start there. Cade, I'll give you the floor. I'll give my opinion after. But what are some of the positive takeaways you've seen from your viewing period when you talk about this football team and all the fall camp practices?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. My number one would be the receiver room, just the depth that room has. You start at the top. The top end is elite. I mean, you're talking Isaiah Horton and Mario Craver. In my opinion, 2 all SEC level talents at the top there. And then, that's not even it. You talk about the second and third tier of that group is well above average, even on SEC level terms. Terry Bussey's had a great fall camp. I'm sure everyone that's been locked into fall camp coverage knows that by now. And the thing is that it's real. I mean, he's had he's had a great camp overall. Just looks a lot more ripped up. Has been making plays left and right. Guys like Ashton Bethel-Roman has looked really good as well. And then you look at some of the younger guys as well. Aaron Gregory, Jaden Warren. Those guys have really stood out. We'll see, how often they will ultimately get in the game, given, how much depth they have in that position room. But it just has to excite you for the future of this program, that all those guys, are there, and that, we're getting this good return, on those guys at this point. So the number one thing that has really, really encouraged me is the receiver room. And a lot of that is because of the questions that there has been around the offense. The running back room, Ruben stepping into the RB1, role, losing 4 NFL draft picks on the offensive line, Holloman Wiggins stepping into the offensive coordinator role. All of these unknowns that we have going into the season, it it gives me some reassurance that we have that much talent at the receiver room to be able to help Marcel out whenever they start playing SEC level, football, that Arizona State and Kentucky game heading into LSU, it's going to be interesting to see, how those guys help out Marcel. And ultimately, that's been the number one highlight for me is the receiver room.
Yeah, and obviously I have a different one to talk about, but I want to stay there real quick and just to your point, right? I think I had a conversation on the board about some of the differences. When we talk about how good Terry Bussey is and how good he's been playing, that's worthy of conversation because of where he was relative, right? A 5-star kid who had just kind of scratched the surface, hasn't really done everything people had hoped to when they brought him in, as a former two-way high school player, right? Started off at cornerback, found his way as a wide receiver, is kind of still growing in that role. He has been super, super impressive. Now, if this was a different team and a different program, you're looking at a guy who's probably a wide receiver 2, maybe, right? Like you go even below that, you're a different level. He's probably wide receiver 1 in a lot of programs. But here, because of how talented it is, he's a guy who is fighting for that fringe wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type of situation, where in the spring, we were talking about an Aaron Gregory as a guy like, hey, maybe this guy's going to force his way onto the field, and he may still do that. But the most impressive thing is about the fact that Terry Bussey has put on that size. He's kind of figured it out as a route runner. He's figured it out as a playmaker at the wide receiver position, to the point where, like, you got to put the brakes on an Aaron Gregory just because of how good he's playing. But to that point, Isaiah Horton, Mario Craver, those are the unquestioned 1s and 2, right? Like, we're not going to debate that. But I wanted to speak on it because people had talked about this whole beat. Everybody on the beat that's been at practice has saw how good Terry Bussey is. But you take that and say, it's still so talented that he's fighting to get into that mix. Really good problem to have if you're Texas A&M, like really, really good problem. And when you look at that group and you talk about the strength of this unit and you say, oh, it's Holman Wiggins, he's a first-time play caller, there's going to be some questions and doubt about that until we actually see it flying on game day, week 1, going from there. But where I'm really encouraged is not only that wide receiver talent, but just how good Marcel Reed has been in the times that we've been able to see him. Now, when he said, and we talked to him last week, how he had yet to throw an interception in team period, I think everybody put a tweet out or everybody wrote some note and put a pin on it, because that is something that's been a number one conversation point all off season, right? He threw 12 interceptions last year, some of them in really big moments against really important opponents in big games. He understands what he has to do. I'm telling you, from a tactician point, right, from footwork to his tightness, upper level, upper body, arm motion, all of that, he looks far more crisp. He looks strong. He looks confident. He looks like the ball has come out of his hands with a lot more zip. Like, for me, if you're talking about wide receiver as the best group and the group that has looked the most impressive, I'd argue that Marcel Reed is right there underneath that as one of the guys who have really impressed me. And that's a huge thing. That's not smoke. I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's what, but I'm telling you the fact, and as we see it, everything we've seen from Marcel Reed, even from the spring, looks to be stronger. I don't know if you agree. Did I go off on a rocker there, Cade, or do you kind of see it the same way?
No, I definitely see it the same way. We've talked about it on our post-game shows. He has looked, a lot better. He looks, he looks in command. He's been making good choices in terms of where he wants to throw the ball. Looking at his first read, if that's not there, looking at second, third, not making the risky pass, things like that. And like you said, with his mechanics, he looks a lot better than we saw him last year. Ultimately everything we've seen has been, everything we have seen has been leading us to have some optimism for him heading into this year. Ultimately, I've said it before, right now, given the circumstance of, where things are at, he's right where you want him to be heading into, 2 weeks of camp and then getting the season going. So he's definitely on pace for what we expected from him.
For sure. And that's a credit to him and the hard work, right? Like I had known that he's working with Jeff Christensen, a renowned QB coach, a guy who has trained Patrick Mahomes for years. He trained Fernando Mendoza last year when he became a Heisman and then eventual first overall pick in the NFL draft. Like he has put himself in position with the people in addition to working with Joey Lynch and just the grind, right? Like he understands it. From my conversations with him, he's a guy who sees the disrespect. He sees the conversation points. He's even mentioned it. Like in the first press conference last year, he said, I know I'm not a passer, right? And like he's still fighting those demons for, whatever reason. I think the conversation about A&M's offense last year was, can they pass the ball? They proved they can do that. Now, can they take another step forward? I understand that the offensive line is going to be cobbled together and they're going to find a way to find the best 5 pieces here. But if you talk about this pass catcher group and a quarterback who is now a veteran with skins on the wall, who's played in big games, like I'm sitting here and I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. Now, turning the page on the other side of the ball and staying positive here, you got to be really impressed with like the pass rush group. And I mean, more so at the top, right? When you talk about a Marco Jones, you talk about an Anto Saka, even TJ Searcy got a little pass rush bag and somebody who is going to be really stout in the run game. Now, when I look at that group, that's another group with question marks. That's a group where a lot of people are saying, hey, you have to replace 3 starters, including a consensus, unanimous All-American and Cassius Howell. Like that's going to be hard. And I think ultimately they've done a great job of adding pieces in the transfer portal. They got guys who are going to step up like Sam and Pemba. They got pieces there. I want to know, is that where you're positive on the defensive side of the ball is? And I steal your thunder, or do you got a different position group that's kind of jumped out to you?
I definitely feel the same way about the edge rushers that you do. Really the top 3 guys, Marco Jones, TJ Searcy, and Anto Saka. Those guys have looked incredible throughout practice. But my number one would probably be, in terms of position group that have really shown me some optimism, is probably linebacker. I've talked about it many times, in my writing and in our post-game shows. Obviously, I want to start with Damian Samford. Coming in with his injury, he practiced the first practice of fall camp, which I thought was huge for his development, getting back. That was huge. From that first practice until where we're at today, he has already shown a lot of growth. Like the first couple of days, it seemed like he was like kind of getting back to, being in football shape, because whenever you have an injury, obviously rehab is going to keep you in shape, but you got to get into football shape, once you put the pads on and you get out there. And I think, it took him a little bit, to ultimately get back to that. But the last practice we saw, he was playing with some real strength, some real pop. And it was really encouraging to see that he's been progressing, into a point where, we could see him, week 1. Now, the other pieces to that linebacker room, Noah McHale, who we spoke to, the media got to speak to, looks like a real deal SEC level linebacker. The first day that we walked into camp, I looked over and saw him and was really surprised by just, the frame that he had been able to build in that Tommy Moffitt, strength and conditioning system for only a year. He looks like a real deal linebacker. He plays with his hair on fire. He plays with passion. There were multiple plays where, he was the one dictating the pace on the defense. He was the one that was bringing the energy, popping the pads. He was doing everything you wanted to see out of a linebacker. And then you add in Ray Coney as well, the transfer from Tulsa, who, had a lot of tackles last season, was near the top of the country in overall tackles. That's another guy that looks like a real deal SEC linebacker as well. Those 2 guys have really been flying around. And so to have those 2 guys look as good as they did, plus a Sanford, which we know what Sanford can do. We know he has that ability. If he comes back and is Sanford on top of those 2 guys, man, that linebacker room is in a really good spot.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've been accused of being too positive at times, and I like that. Like I think I'm a glass half full type of person. So for me to be accused of being too positive, I can take that. But I will say with that is I was very anxious about what this linebacker room could look like, especially with a world where Damian Sanford wouldn't be 100% ready. I think leading up until SEC Media Days, the idea that week one was even on the table was unheard of, right? Like even the conversations we had back in the back, talking to people behind the scenes, off the record and stuff, like there was encouragement. It seemed that it wasn't going to be as bad as many thought it would, but week one seemed like something that was crazy until Elko got on the press their first week, day one, and was like, hey, like everything's online, right? Like he's got to work in, but like we feel really good about where he's at. And so for me, when I look at this linebacker room, I was a little nervous, right? Like I understand Ray Coney is super productive at 129 tackles at Tulsa last year, but SEC is a different level of football, right? Noel McHale had 16 tackles last year. Year two jump, his role got a lot bigger. And I even asked him too. I think, in the presser we had with him, I said, when Ray Coney went down, as a human, you feel bad, but as a competitor, where you're like, okay, I gotta like put myself in gear. And he was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, yeah, like I gotta be ready to go, and there is no, there's nobody coming to help him. Like this linebacker room is replacing Torian York, a captain, a well-respected player, a well-talented player, a 3-year starter, and a guy in Scooby Williams who came in and flashed under Jay Bateman and in this group. It was really impressive. So I had my reservations about what this linebacker room could look like. Everything I've seen thus far in practice has kind of calmed those nerves about what this position can be. Jordan Lockhart is a dude who's tough. He's gritty. He can figure it out, and he doesn't often get spoken about, right? It's usually Ray Coney, like you mentioned. It's Noel McHale. Even the young cats look good. Tank King has looked great. Storm Miller's had moments. Tamarian Watkins is a guy who we've told is the best-looking freshman that people have seen in a long time. It's just – I don't think it's nearly as bare in the cupboard as I thought going into it. And that's really encouraging about the youth, the way they recruit, the way they bring in pieces. I mean, man, just the young cats alone. But if you get Coney and you get a version of him that we had seen last year in the Conference USA with the healthy Damian Sanford, the middle of that defense is fine. Right, DJ Hicks is going to be good at the interior. I'm a big fan of what CJ Mims has been able to do in practice. Like this run defense, in my opinion, should be improved. And I don't know if I was going to say that, coming into fall camp this year. And so with that, switching gears a little bit, we talked about a lot of the positives, and we briefly want to talk about some of the things we're worried about, right? Some of the things we still have some question marks about, and I'm encouraged to see and curious to see what you think, because I have some things that still want to figure out, right? And we still got to see, and we got a couple more times to see it. But Cade, when you look at this team, all of the positives aside, what are some things you have a little bit of questions about?
Yeah, so I think mine would be the overall offensive unit as a whole. I know there's been some conversation about that, and it's really just because there is a lot of unproven, and you're not going to get any answer to any of these questions until you actually start playing football, right? And really until you start playing Arizona State and Kentucky heading into that LSU game, to where some of these questions are, some of this stuff is going to get figured out. But, obviously, Holman Wiggins, calling the plays, what is that going to look like? How similar is it going to be to, Colin Klein last year? What are the intricacies going to be? What are the differences going to be? How is that going to gel with, how what Marcel's skill set is, and ultimately, what he needs to succeed this year. And then, of course, the offensive line. I've liked what I've seen from the offensive line unit. It's just an unknown because, you're bringing in a group of players that really haven't gone to war together, right? Good players, good individual players, but they need to be working as a unit. And it's hard. You can build that chemistry and work towards it, in practice and in fall camp, but it's hard, it's hard to replicate really being in the battlefield and ultimately, things going wrong and how do you respond to that, stuff like that. So really just, that offensive line unit and the offense as a whole is really my big question mark. And then also, a little bit of Ruben as well. I'm a believer in Ruben. Ruben has definitely shown me a lot throughout fall camp. But what does it look like whenever he steps into that RB1 role with no Le'Veon Moss? I know he led the team in rushing last year. But what does it look like from week 1 till the end of the season as RB1? What does that look like for Ruben? What does that look like for Jamarian Morrow to come in and give some carries, or a potential Tiger Ryden, or a potential KJ Edwards, Carson Baker? What does that running game look like? So there's just some unanswered questions on the offensive side of the ball, and they aren't going to get answered until we start playing football. So that would ultimately be my biggest, I wouldn't say concern, but just questions about how the team is going to, ultimately pan out.
And we actually kind of agree, but in a little bit of different way, because I hear what you're saying, right? I think I probably have a little bit more encouragement. We talked about the wide receivers. I think the tight ends may surprise some people. I think Micah Riley has even surprised me a little bit. And we know Houston Thomas and Richie Anderson have found ways to make plays in their previous stops. But for me, when I look at this offensive unit, I expect them to be good only because I see some of that top end talent. But to your point, to get to the same kind of spot as you is what you said about they hadn't been to war together yet as an offensive line is perfectly said. Like individually, I love Wilkin Formby. He's really been impressive at right tackle. I think Tyree Adams is going to fit right in a left tackle. And those are spots to me that I feel like are solidified, obviously with Mark Naboo at center. But what do they do at guard? Is it Blake Ivy at left guard? Is it Trevon Baugh, who is an upperclassman, a guy who is a senior who came in, I don't think, to sit, right? So you got to figure out what exactly is the middle of that look like. Is it Robert Bornon getting some change? And I understand he's somebody who can play multiple different spots. Really good piece in the middle of that group where you can use a lot of position flex. But you're absolutely right. This is a group that needs to mesh together, and they're going to live or die by that offensive line, right? They're going to find a way to be really good if they can protect Marcel Reed. Now, it doesn't have to be, Joe Moore award winning to be good. Marcel Reed can get out. He's like Houdini back there. But can you keep him upright? Can you give him just a little bit of time? Can you get him out the back door? Can you find a way to just give him some time to get out to his playmakers? And that's going to be the question. On top of that, right, and to your point, Holman Wiggins, right? I think that's the question, another question we can't answer until week 1. What does his offense look like? What does this group as a totality look like as a play caller? Those are things that I'm really kind of curious. Like you said, not worried, but curious about what it's going to look like. So that I'm right there with you. And it's funny. With all of the pieces on defense and some of the injuries and the things that we're monitoring with Damian Sanford, it's funny that neither of us kind of mentioned the defense because we have so much trust in what Mike Elko is building and Lyle Hemphill and his skins on the wall. Like that's a defensive unit that should have a high floor no matter what. So they're going to keep them in games. Can this offensive line hold up? Can Marcel Reed make plays and protect the football? And what does Ruben Owens look like as a true running back one? And can they find the production they miss by losing Casey Concepcion to the NFL draft? So some questions, a lot of things that can be answered. And when you look at this team in totality, it's not a ton of stuff that you're overly worried about. It's just, hey, can they execute at a high level and find a way to be good? So, for me, when I look at this group, it's this whole team as a whole, everything we've seen has been super, super impressive. Obviously, it's not been all sunshines and rainbows, and we're going to talk about that. Obviously, we talked about some of the question marks here. But before we wrap up, Cade, and get out of here, is there anything you didn't talk about that if you don't get it off your chest, you're going to be upset that we didn't talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to speak a little bit. I wrote a piece on the board. So if you're not subscribed, definitely get a VIP subscription to GigEm247. But I wrote a piece on some of the freshmen that really stood out to me. I'm not going to give everything away. If you want to, read everything, you got to go to the site. But I wanted to mention two freshmen that ultimately have really, really stood out to me. One is KJ Edwards. There was multiple plays that we saw in practice where KJ, blew open a run for 20 plus yards or made someone miss or, just was making plays. As the recruiting guy, I've been covering Texas A&M recruiting for a couple years now. And I covered KJ whenever he was in East Texas at Carthage. He rushed for over 6,000 yards at Carthage. Like this is like a real deal East Texas, real deal player. Number 3 ranked running back in the country when the cycle closed. So he came in as a very highly recruited guy. But since he's gotten to campus, he's really lived up to, what I saw from him at Carthage. Like, I see it whenever he goes out there in practice. Now, will he get a bunch of carries, year one as a true freshman? Maybe not, because of the guys that have been above him, the guys that have been in the program longer than him, Ruben, Jamari Morrow, Tiger Ryden, guys like that. But my personal prediction is I think we're going to see some of KJ Edwards by the end of the year. I think, his ability is just too good for him to, stay on the sideline the entire year. And then the second guy I wanted to talk about was Brandon Arrington. He was one of the guys, like Noah McHale, the first day of practice I walk in, that just really, really stood out to me. He came in as another highly recruited guy as well. And he came in kind of thin. Like he's big, lanky, I think he's 6'2", big corner. But from the spring till now, just in these last couple months in the summer, he has really put on some muscle. Like, he looks like a real deal player now. He's got some muscle to him. He still moves fluid. I'm not sure, again, like KJ, just because he's young and the depth of these position groups, I'm not sure how much we'll see him this year, but very, very excited for the potential of a Brandon Arrington, corner down the line for Texas A&M. If it's not this year, next year, or the year after that, very, very excited for Brandon Arrington. So I just wanted to, point out those two guys, that we might not see this year, but A&M fans should be very, very excited for the future.
For sure. And to the point about us and who we need to call out, and somebody we didn't speak on that I think deserves it, is Julio Humphrey, right? This is the guy who came in. A lot of people, myself included, said, hey, give Ricky Gibson the other side. Give him the other side opposed to Des Ricks, and those are your starting corners. Maybe you got Jordan Shaw in the nickel, and let's roll, right? That's what I thought. I was told a few times, like, pump the brakes. Like, Julio Humphrey's got a shot at this, and I think he's got more than a shot at this. He's been super impressive. Obviously, we know the athlete he is, and we know the talent he is. A kid who was at Georgia, started at Georgia for 10 games, right? Like, you're starting on a championship level defense as a young kid. Like, he's somebody that deserves, another look. I know that last year didn't go the way he wanted to, and I know last year he didn't play as much as he wanted to. This year he came in motivated. You can see it in the spring. You can see it now in the fall camp practices. He's strong. He's tough. He's somebody who talks. He plays with an edge. I think you need a guy like that. And I mean this with the most respect possible. He's kind of got that psycho mentality of, like, he's going to talk his talk. He's going to make plays. Super well spoken to us in the media, but you get him on the field and a switch flips, right? And you just love that. So I wanted to make sure we talked about that. I know it's going to be Julio, and I know Dez, and they're going to rotate the secondary, but don't sleep on Julio Humphrey, somebody that I made the mistake of potentially sleeping on him early. I learned my lesson. He's a kid that I think is going to be a big piece of this defense. But we're going to get out of here. We've been going hard here for 53, 54 minutes here. Guys, this is going to be an every week thing, at least 2-3 times a week. Post-game live reactions. Mondays are going to have opposing beat reporters, and Wednesdays is going to be me, Cade, and Jackson DePasquale talking all things recruiting and anything that's up and coming. We want you guys to talk. We want your comments, and obviously we want you guys over at the board. Like you can see at the banner at the bottom, 60% off annual VIP promo code is GigEm60. Come on, guys. You want to join. I think we got to earn it, but I think you guys will like what we got going on over here, and this is just the start. So with that, Tony Catalina, Texas A&M insider, Cade Draughon, leading recruit analyst, man, he was the star of the show. Glad he was here. Glad we were able to do this. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace.